This podcast is for singers who have music in their soul and want to be in the spotlight. We are INVICTA Vox Radio.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of INVICTA Vox Radio. We are your hosts, Mike and
Angie Lee.
And today we're going to conclude a conversation that we started,
Episode 2.
On episode 2. And so again, in the past few episodes, what we've talked about is know and be okay with where you're at right now, understand what you want, declare what you want to other people, and then take that first step. And so last time we talked about declaring to people and about taking that first step and kind of what's the right first step, or is there a right first step? And so I want to kind of wrap up that discussion today and then move into the fifth and final point, which is...
Don't stop.
Don't stop.
Yeah, once you start moving, don't stop. The only way you see results is if you keep going.
So we're going to rewind just a little bit.
Yep.
And go.
That was a really good
Yeah,
example.
that was the best.
We should use that in a song.
Yeah. I feel like I could be good as one of those guys in songs that just does the background noises. Like brah, brah. Stuff like that. So if you want me to ever be on one of your albums doing that, I'd be more.
I will let you know. Anytime I need some 90s R&B sounds, I will hit you up.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So one thing that I kind of mentioned last time is the two things I want to talk about with this first step is what would you say your ideal first step is, and then what I think mine is, and then let's talk about what happens when you take steps out of order, and then we'll move on to the next point.
Let's talk about sequencing for sure. I think that once you know where you want to go and you've been real with where you're at and you are really understanding what your skill set is and you really understand if there's any discrepancies in where you want to be from that and you've declared what you want to do, I think the first thing that you need to get to work on is making sure you have the skills necessary to get where you want to go. And everyone has gifts. Gifts and skills are different. And we'll get into this in another episode in depth too about, what's the difference between talent and training as far as singing and musicianship and all of those things go. But to be very real, most people that are incredible at their craft have put an incredible amount of time into it. And if you haven't done that and you found that your skills are lacking, let's be real with that and let's get to work. And I feel like that's step one, is evaluating which skills are lacking and where we need to push.
Right. Like step number one isn't, hey, I'm going to go start recording stuff for YouTube if you haven't ever even developed the skills to
produce
be able to do that in the first place.
To cover music, to be able to play an instrument, to be able to sing, to do all that, or to even have the skill of collaboration, because that in and of itself is a skill. So there's all these different little things that we can potentially be working on if we are lacking in that area. And I'm here to tell you guys, you are definitely lacking somewhere, because we all have things that we're naturally a little more good at because we've put more time into them. And then there's things that we haven't. And so it's being very real with where your platform is that you're starting at, to say, okay, I'm a really great singer, but I know nothing about musicianship and playing an instrument, or I know nothing about songwriting, or I know nothing about YouTube videos or how to start a following on Instagram. Like it's evaluating what skills are working for you and evaluating what skills are not working for you. And then saying, okay, the one that I'm going to tackle now is this skill, and I'm going to get going. And that's a step. That is a really cool step. That doesn't mean that has to be the first step, but I feel like that's one of the foundational things that if you get that nailed down and your skills are solid, it's a lot easier to move.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great first step to take, is just ensuring that you have the skills before you move on to anything else.
Yeah, it's phase one. And I think that's another thing that people need to understand. You guys, you have to understand that there's going to be phases to the journey. It's not, like you said, Mike, just jumping out the gate and going right into professional recording and making YouTube videos and going live like just all the time.
Which that actually seems where most people start nowadays.
But that's the thing. So we have something that's called the 4D assessment here at the studio. It's the 4-dimensional artist, and that's what we believe in coaching people to be, right? The funny thing is that creativity, the fourth section, the fourth dimension of that is getting into all of your music video production and your artist development and your songwriting and your, website and your market niche and all of those things that everybody wants to just jump into. That's like the icing on the cake. In our book, there's 3 dimensions of your artistry that come before that. And the first one is your technique, right? Whether it's in your voice or your instrument, no matter what that might be, we're going to get that solid. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection, but we're going to get it solid. Number 2 is your musicianship and really understanding all of the layers of that. And then number 3 is performing, because you have to know how to perform. And then there's layers to that too, right? Like, is it live performance? Is it a recording studio? What does that all mean? What's your persona on stage? All of that, right? So then we have performing as your 3rd dimension. We don't even get to the creativity section till dimension 4.
Right.
To be a 4-dimensional artist. So you're right. People jump way ahead and leave behind all the skill building because they just want to get started. And I applaud all you quick starts. I am one of you. I totally get that. But it actually makes the journey longer and harder if you don't scale back and go, okay, are my skills in a place where I can start moving effectively? And again, I don't mean your skills have to be number 1 in the nation, in the world, better than any A-list artist. I just mean get efficient in your skill set so that you can move more efficiently into the other dimensions.
Right. And I completely agree with all that. The only thing I would add to it, so this is going into what my ideal first step is.
Yeah.
So if I go back to my 18-year-old, 19-year-old self, this is what I would tell myself. It's a perspective that you gain once you're 30, 40, 50. You're going to live all this life regardless.
Yeah, no matter what you do, as long as you don't die an unfortunate early death.
Right. So you're going to have a long life to live. So if you want to go after something, and this kind of bleeds into the last point we're going to make in this, is just go after it, right? The journey's going to wind. It's going to move in and out and in and out. But if you just dedicate yourself to it for the long haul and you don't need instant gratification, then eventually you're going to get there, right? Like just for as an example. So if you sat back and you said, "Okay, I'm 18 years old. I'm starting this a little late."
Which, by the way, guys, that's not late.
Right.
But it feels like it is.
Right.
It feels
but
like it is.
Okay, I'm going to start playing piano because I want to become a professional pianist. And so I'm going to start that at 18 years old. Your real problem is if you expect to get good super fast and you get frustrated with yourself. But if you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to pace myself. Hopefully in 5 to 10 to 15 years from now, I'll be at that professional level. But I'm going to have all this time every day regardless. And so I'm going to work towards this over a long period of time.
Yeah, I feel like, especially as the older we get, we feel like we should be really good at things very quickly. And so I totally agree with you on that front. That's not how it works.
Right.
Right? Time, times time, times time, and doing things over a long period of time compounds into making you the person you want to be in every aspect of your life. So it's no different when it comes to your music and your skills.
Right.
Right? That being said, when I was talking about developing your skill sets, while you're in the act of developing your skills, that doesn't mean you can't get started doing other things too. You can do things simultaneously. You can work on your other dimensions as your artistry. You can start dabbling with creating music videos and maybe buy yourself an at-home studio and learn how to produce your own stuff. You can do that simultaneously, but just don't skip over skill development.
Right, because that is skill development as well, right? You have to develop the skills to do all that. And sometimes you're going to find, like, say you are working on your vocal technique and you're you're developing in that way, but then you want to go out and perform. And the first time you go out to perform, you realize that you don't have your own like vibe to everything.
Right.
So then you kind of get to understand that through performance, and then you bring it back to
You're singing.
Yeah.
They all play on each other for sure. And so I just want to caution people to that too, because it's fun. If you go back and look at all my music from when I really started to get serious about recording at age 15, it is a total journey, and you get to watch that and see the growth with every single thing I produced along the way. So that's, I just want to make sure I define that for you guys. I'm not saying wait to do things, but I am saying try to do them in the right order. And my 15-year-old self, obviously at age 36, 21 years later, I'm a way better singer than I was when I was 15, right? Because I've never stopped, and I've kept going, and I've kept working on it and dialing it in. And I've been coaching for 20 years, so I get it, right? But I would never go back to my 15-year-old self and say, you know what, you should wait to record until your voice is way better. That's not what I'm saying. I want you to start. I want you to do all of these things. I want you to jump in, head first, but be sure that you're not leaving essential critical things behind. Make sure that you're building everything together so that you can be a complete artist.
Right. And I think that's how we were going to talk about sequencing. I think this is just a really good point
this is where it is.
To talk about what happens when you do things out of order. So we talked like, hey, just go and take that first step, whatever you think it is, right?
Whatever
and
it
Angie's
is.
talking about skill development. I think
and it's something that lights you on fire too, right? You want to be doing something that you really want to do.
Right. But get that mindset that that this is just gonna take time, and you need to develop over time, and it's not gonna be quick, and then go in and develop those skills.
Yeah.
But let's say that you do things out of sequence, right? And for this instance, we're gonna say you haven't really developed yourself vocally, but you want to get out there and perform. So you perform before you're a good vocalist.
And we see that happen, especially with our rock bands. A lot of guys are like, yeah, let's put a band together. And then they start performing, and they've been on the road, and they're doing tours, and they're out there for like a couple years. And then the lead singer realizes, hey, I'm losing my voice on tour. I can't sustain this.
Right.
Right?
Or you go out there and you think you're good, and then you play in front of a crowd, and you get instant feedback that maybe you aren't that good. And so what I think happens when you do things out of sequence, when you go too far ahead, is you realize where all the holes are in your game, and you typically fail. And in that, you shouldn't get frustrated and go, oh, I suck. I shouldn't ever try and do this again. What it means is take a step back, look at what the steps are that you could take to get successful at that point, and then you realize that you skipped a step. And the same is true in business, right? Like we had an event that we tried to do that went horribly.
Epic fail. I think it was the most embarrassing moment of my life.
Yeah, I was super embarrassed.
Mortified. It was awful.
But not to go into details, but it really showed us like, okay, we weren't ready for this. But sometimes you have to take that step out of sequence to be able to see the skills that you don't have yet, and then to rewind and start to build those skills.
Well, yeah, the epic fail we're talking about, you guys, is the thing that created INVICTA Nation. Sorry, that's our group with our artists, but INVICTA Vox. The reason INVICTA Vox exists is because of this other epic fail that we had. And it would have been so easy for us to give up at that point and be like, you know what? This isn't for us. We're not going to do this. And Mike's going to go back to being an engineer and making pretty good money. And I'm going to teach voice out of my one-room studio. And that's what we're going to do because it's comfortable and way less embarrassing than the epic fails that we've had, right? And so don't let those fails get you down. We talk about this all the time at the studio, but fail forward. So we see the things that have happened. We see the errors once we've actually failed, which you cannot see before you fail.
Right.
Right? You can only see them after you fail. And if you can look back and say, okay, this is where I missed it. I probably should have gotten some voice lessons so that my voice didn't go out halfway through my tour. Or I should have gotten some voice lessons so that my pitch was good when I got on stage for that singing competition, right? It's going back and saying, okay, I realize now I might have jumped out the gate a little fast, and I got to reel it back and learn how to produce music on my own because this is costing way too much money, right? So it's every layer of it, and again, you just have to take a step and see how it goes and then fill in the gaps.
Right.
Right?
So with every step, you're either going to progress and gain confidence along the way, or you're going to fail. And in that failure, you should look at what lessons need to be learned and then start to learn those. So that way, when you come back to that point, for example, our failure, we're actually going to go back after what we attempted to do in another year or two, because we know we have all these skills to build. But once we're there, then we're going to try again.
We're going to be able to do it again. And we might fail again, but it will probably not fail as hard as last time.
No.
So it might take us a few fails to get that one dialed in. But yeah, so don't be afraid to fail, because I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't take the first step is they're like, man, I'm going to put myself out there now. And the second you put yourself out there, you know you're open to scrutiny and to people being trolls and not being nice to you and tearing you down. And that's a very vulnerable thing to do. Singing and performing is the most vulnerable thing you can do in your life. It is so hard. It's so much harder to get up and sing a song in front of people than it is to just play the piano.
Right.
Because you can hide behind your instrument. And if your instrument doesn't sound good, you can be like, oh, yeah, I wish I would have gotten a better piano. You know, it's the piano's fault. It's out of tune. Like, you can kind of do that. But with your own voice, when people start to scrutinize that, that's really tough. You completely open your heart and your soul to scrutiny. And so that's another thing. I think people wait too long because they're afraid of what people are going to think. But I want to remind you that, yes, we need to fail to get better. Number one. Number two, having haters is a good thing, because that means you're actually making waves. It's way better to have haters than to not, because if you have haters, you're getting attention. If you don't have haters, that also means you don't have people that like you. That means that you're unremarkable.
Yeah.
You want to be remarkable.
For sure.
And
absolutely.
so don't be afraid to take that first step because you're afraid of what people are going to think. Number one. Yeah?
Yeah.
Or I said that was number two. Number one was be vulnerable. Do that thing.
Right.
I'm going backwards.
But yeah. So, and all this plays into the final point, which is, again, and it kind of goes with what my ideal first step is don't ever quit. Right? If you really, really want something, you'll find out along the way if you actually wanted something or if it's a hobby, because the higher level you want to reach, like the more ambitious you are, you're going to hit points where you just absolutely are ready to give up. And
you're just wrecked.
And sometimes it's on a daily basis, and you got to pick yourself up and recommit on a daily basis to it. But what you find eventually is you start to get the rewards that you were seeking in the beginning. But it takes way more time typically than people think.
Yeah,
initially.
It always does.
So again, have that mindset that you're going to live this life no matter what. So go in and live it, pursue what you want, and don't stop, okay? Because there's no reason to stop unless you get to the point where you're like, okay,
I actually don't want this anymore.
Yeah, this is not what I thought it was, and I really don't want it as bad as the effort I have to put into this.
Yeah, I agree. You can't get results unless you keep going.
Yeah.
And sometimes those results, they don't come on a daily basis, you guys. You're not going to, start taking lessons and then put yourself out there and see instant results. That's not the way it works. It takes years for that stuff to bubble. So pace yourselves and understand that we need to recognize the little wins on a daily basis rather than worrying about seeing instant major results, because that's just not the way it works. It's compounding every single day. You see these little wins, we celebrate little wins, and then at the end of it, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I just did that. I just achieved it. Right? And then you keep going. So, yeah, never stop. That's the trick. If people never stopped and they just kept going with everything they started, you would see a lot more dreams coming true in this world.
Yeah. But it's just those little kicks in the butt, those missteps, those out of sequence steps along the way that get people discouraged, and then they quit most of the time.
Yep.
So, again, just to wrap all this up.
Since episode 2.
Right. So understand where you're at. Be real with it, right? Because that's the only way you can know what your first step needs to be. Understand what you want. So get clear about what you want. If you really want it, how hard you're actually willing to work for it. So get very clear on that. Then, As soon as you get that established, declare it to somebody else. Get some support behind you and have other people help hold you accountable to the steps that you need to take moving forward. So that way they help you in not quitting.
Yeah. So they hold you accountable, and also declare it to yourself so that you hold yourself accountable.
Right. Write it down daily. If you really want it, write it down daily.
Yep.
Then take that first step. And sometimes you're going to know what that first step is. A lot of times you're not going to.
You just got to dive.
And in that situation, try and find somebody who's been down the path before that you can ask questions to.
A good mentor will save you a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
And then finally, just don't quit.
Yep.
You'll get there eventually. And
Never stop. Stop stopping.
Yeah, and that's what the game is all about. I think next episode we're going to jump off this topic because I think we've kind
hammered it out, man.
Yeah, we're there. But sorry, little. Yep. So until next time, everybody, make sure that you let your friends know about the podcast, anybody that you think would benefit from it, and make sure to comment, like, subscribe, all the fun things that you can do.
Share the love.
If you have any questions or would like some additional clarification from us, then leave a comment, let us know what you think, and we will talk to you guys later. Peace.